got less than 2 weeks until the midterm election, and there was a big debate last night in a race that could ultimately decide who controls the Senate. So we've got Democrat John Fetterman squared off against Republican TV doc Mehmet Oz for the open Senate seat in Pennsylvania. Now, they sparred about abortion, crime, fracking, but what everyone was really watching was Fetterman's condition. He had a stroke 6 months ago and is still recovering. Fetterman addressed the concerns, but at times seemed to have trouble communicating. Let's take a look.
And let's also talk about the elephant in the room. I had a stroke. He's never let me forget that. And I might miss some words during this debate, mush 2 words together, but it knocked me down, but I'm going to keep coming back up. I'm here today to have a debate. I have speeches in front of 3,000 people in Montgomery County, all across Pennsylvania, big crowds. I believe if my doctor believes that I'm fit to serve, and that's what I believe is appropriate.
So the question we're asking, and I know many of you are as well, especially there in Pennsylvania, do you think Fetterman's condition is going to sway this race? And is it fair to count him out if he's still recovering, Tori? And his own doctor has said, I have it right here, that he does not face any cognitive disability.
Right. Well, right now, first of all, I'll just say the performance wasn't great from Fetterman. I just want to be honest about that. There were stumbles, there were pauses, it was a little awkward. So I'm going to call that out. It wasn't his best performance. He's not a great debater, actually. But we have a president right now who is a stutterer, and it doesn't seem to matter in any terms of policy-wise. So what I was looking for was policy, and for me, the big moment of the night was this on Dr. Oz's part. Let's take a quick look.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
So that went really viral last night because he said for abortions, he would want women, doctors, and local political leaders to be making that decision. It's like a clown car of people in the room in a very intimate, private moment. John Fetterman got $1 million off of that flub last night alone. So to me, that was the moment of the night. And when he said he'd also back for Trump, he would support Trump, got a big boo. That was big for me. But again, I'm going to say it. Fetterman wasn't great, didn't look strong, and I would imagine some people are concerned.
Whew. The question was, is it fair to count him out? And do you think that it was going, if it's going to make a difference? I don't think it's fair to count him out. I do think that it's going to sway people just because of how we view disability in any form, whether it's temporary or permanent in this world. And that's not fair, especially if his cognitive abilities are strong and able to hold his own in this position. It also made me very uncomfortable for him to say, I had a stroke and he has never let me forget it. Mm-hmm. He is in Dr. Oz.
Yeah, Dr. Oz has said over and over again.
There's been some back and forth.
Dr. Oz has never let him forget that he had a stroke, as if strokes haven't affected millions of people, including a multitude of people in his own constituency, potentially. So that was very uncomfortable to watch.
Jeff, as a constituent, especially if you're in Pennsylvania, would it concern you if your candidate or potential candidate had just suffered a stroke 6 months prior?
Let me speak in generalities here. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
yes. Okay, good. Because I love this subject. Here's the thing. Tori throws out immediately abortion. Boom. If you're not with me, you're killing babies. I get it. Erica throws out, boom, another hot topic, right? The way he spoke, and if you don't appreciate him, then you're against people with disabilities or think they're less than or think they can't. That's hard to argue with those, right? So when you put those on the table, it's hard to argue with that without being a bigot. Do you know what I mean? Oh, you're against people with disabilities? You're against people who kill? I'm for women making their own choice, right? I think we need to look at people as a whole. I'm for great orators. He is not. I'm not against people with disabilities. I'm more of an Obama guy. I want someone to lead me like a coach. That's who I am, right? President Biden today, I was watching, getting some coffee. He came on. He was talking about all these things that people do, Ticketmaster, taking money, the airlines taking
Corporate
money.
profits.
Corporate profits. He goes, I want to get rid of that. That's something I can get behind. I'm with that. You know what I mean? Where was this guy all along? I want to talk about those topics. When you're talking about those topics and then someone drops an anvil like you're in Looney Tune land on your head and you're like, you're not for abortion? You're like, dude, I can't have a conversation because now I'm that labeled guy. I'm just the labels that we throw around into today's society to win an argument, even the people on TV. I'm not down with that. I want to talk about what's really affecting my life.
Right, but that's what's affecting your life.
Right.
We're talking about what's affecting our lives.
But I don't have an anvil.
Right, but you don't necessarily, Tori talked about abortion. I was talking about the idea of people being judged based on their cognitive ability versus where they are in their physical ability. I was uncomfortable with that. You loved that Joe Biden was talking about corporate profits. We are the constituency collectively. I think where we get into trouble is when, one, I think a lot of times people want to talk about abortion and it's like, you don't see how it really affects you personally. And then you start to, it's like, well, if you're not going with this candidate, then it means that you're anti-abortion.
Right.
I think both of these things can very much be true. And really, we are the subsection of what used to be a very easily talked about in a nuanced way conversation as opposed to a debate.
Well, people aren't comfortable. This brings us to our next point, because a lot of people aren't comfortable saying their exact political views because of the fear of disappointing either party line.
Sure.
So speaking of politics, a new study, what I was referring to, says that a lot of Americans are actually hiding their true political beliefs. In public, they're appearing to be more extreme than their privately held views. And the reason why is a pressure to fit into popular culture and their party's own platforms. So, for example, I want to give you a few examples from the very detailed study. So Democrats are actually, according to this study, more conservative privately when it comes to education issues. Many think schools focus too much on racism, and they're not as enthusiastic about masking to prevent the spread of COVID. Republicans apparently are less set on overturning Roe v. Wade than they say, and have more reservations about turning the internet into a completely unregulated free speech state.
Democrats are more hiding and they're not vocal? That's ridiculous.
But about
That's ridiculous.
But about things like racism in schools, things that a conservative would be. They're scared to say how conservative they actually are.
Okay, that study's a little misleading because it's the Republicans that are scared. If you say you're a Republican out loud, you could lose your job. Is that crazy? Is that ridiculous?
Who
You
is
could
losing
lose
their
your
job from saying they're Republican?
Because now, Hollywood, Tori, Hollywood.
I don't think...
Who in Hollywood is that? You snickered at Chris Pratt the other day just because we brought up his name. Why? Because he's an out Republican.
No, because he's kind of annoying on the internet. I disagree with you on that.
Okay, I totally agree. I've been saying this forever. The people that are coming to the polls because you're not allowed to support Republican ideology because you're automatically labeled a Trump person, those are the silent ones. Those are the ones not giving your opinion. I feel very adamant about this. We'll see what happens when the polls come out. But when other people talk about politics, we didn't even bring up that other guy, Fetterline or whatever. Fetterman. He's like Kevin Fetterline. We do it. The second half of the show, we have fun. It's not politics. But we didn't even come up with the point about his fracking. We didn't play that. We just play like the Democratic point of view on everything. And that's our angle that all media outlets play. We didn't say that 4 years ago in 2018 that he was like, I'm totally against fracking. And now he comes on the stage, he's like, I'm for fracking.
Right, but that was confusing.
But that's a big point that we didn't even bring up. I have to bring these points up. We have to keep the playing field level. We can't label people all the time. We can't use it as a weapon saying you might lose your job by the way you voted. That's not a republic. I mean, I feel like I'm on my own on this, obviously. But
No,
it's
you're
pretty
a true
crazy.
independent. You really are, and I respect that. My mom's a true independent, and they really get frustrated more than anything that if a talking point goes specifically to reel in the voter of that party, it feels like, well, what about me? Because I agree with this on this side, I agree with that on that side. Unfortunately, I feel like the independents have been lost, and I think we're seeing that right here and now, and I don't know if independents can regain any sort of traction in 2022
That's
because we're so politically
I was just going to say,
divided.
because we're so polarized, independent means you're either taking water is wet or water is not wet at this point, and that's a very hard concept for people to understand.